One in Three is intended for mature audiences. Episodes contain explicit content and may be triggering as they often include violence and other varying forms of abuse such as emotional, psychological, sexual, and physical. In most cases, names have been changed to protect all involved. Please note, statements and opinions of guests do not necessarily reflect those of my own. Hi, Warriors. Welcome to One in Three. I'm your host, Ingrid. Last week, we learned a bit about Marisol's personal journey, what high-conflict co-parenting means, and the impact those situations have on the parents and children. Today, she explains how to navigate those circumstances, maintain a healthy relationship with your children, and gray rock your ex. Here is Marisol. Hi, Marisol. Welcome back. Thank you again for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So last episode, we talked about co-parenting and what the definitions are and the impact it has on you as the other parent and on the children. So today, let's talk about how do you get through it? How do you survive high conflict co-parenting?
So the best way that there's three different steps that I actually ended up, or more like tips that I ended up creating through an ebook that I created last year. And honestly, the ebook that I created is called something. I think I forgot what the title that I made for it, but I had to do with like the mistake at its core. It's the mistakes that I made that I feel I had to later on fix because I was, when you're high conflict co-parenting, there's a lot of things that you don't know how to handle, when you're in it. And then you're always wondering, well, did I do this right? Did I do this wrong? How is it affecting my child? How is it affecting me? How long is it going to last? So you have all of these questions, and then you're looking at it and you're like, oh my goodness, how is this going to work? Right. So I ended up coming down with three things that I feel help a lot in high conflict co-parenting. And I don't know if you want me to just go one by one, or how would you like to do that?
I think that, yeah, let's do it that way. Go one by one.
The first one was when, depending on the time that they get, the other parent, I would highly suggest not to control their time. Don't control their time. Whatever it is that they want to do with the child when they're on their time, let that be, even if you don't agree with it. Even if you're listening to it and you're like, what are they doing? Because they're going to do things that are going to just leave you perplexed. And some of those things might actually be sometimes, questionable towards the kids. Some of them may merit, a court hearing. You won't know until you move forward with it, but one of the things I had to learn was to let the time that they have with their child, let that be it. You know what I mean? Let it just roll, but it was really hard. It was really hard to actually be able to do that. And in my ebook, I actually have like a journal section of, where you can work through and process how to let that go. Because as moms, honestly, it was very strange for me once my daughter's father got 50-50 to not have an involvement in my daughter's life. Like, my daughter literally had a whole separate life that I had like no clue about. She had her own friends on that side. They did activities that I was not being part of. They had birthdays I was never privy to. She had like a whole different life that I never really knew about. And as a mom, not only did we not sign up for that, but it's a little bit heartbreaking because we're mom, and you're like, how am I not involved in that, right? So there has to be like a certain level of like boundary, not only the boundary for your child to develop a relationship with their father, as they get older, but then a boundary for yourself, because at the same time you can't really be trying to control what they're doing on their time, so it's a really hard take to do, but it helped me get more of like a perspective of what wasn't mine anymore. But it took me a while to actually let it go. the the second one is, I know it's gonna sound harsh, but like, we as single moms, we put so much of our identity into being a single mom. So I have concluded recently that we need to get a life. outside of our kids.
What are you telling me here? I need to leave
Girl,
the
I
house?
am doing the same thing even now, and my kids are already older. You know what I mean? Like, I'm looking at my life and I'm like, okay, so who am I beyond being a single mom? You know, we do so much surrounding that role. We pick careers based on our kids' school schedules. We, pick schools based on scheduling that. You know what I mean? Like, we do so many logistics to revolve around that role. So, when your kids are not with you, you got to find out what else did you love doing before you even had kids and bring it back in. Like, did you like dancing? Did you like singing? I love to do both. Did you love to write? Did you love, like yourself, you're doing the podcast. That's a great way to like have an outlet that's just yours, because so many of us, our identity is so centered on being a single mom. And at some point, even though you're in the thick of it, it's gonna change and it's gonna morph into your kids at some point moving out, and they're gonna, and like I said, it's a natural way of things, but it doesn't hurt any less. So even though you're going towards, your kids eventually leaving, because I don't know if you guys know, but they're gonna leave. Is the parent role actually is one of the hardest things that I have ever encountered, because you're essentially preparing these human beings to leave you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're trying
Mhm.
to work through things, trying to, build communication, build the bond, but at some point they're going to leave. So I really recommend finding other things that you can do that keep you intact. And actually those things will help too whenever you're going to the high conflict co-parenting thing and you're hearing all of this garbage about yourself, right? Because they're calling you names, they're doing this shady thing this other day that you're like, how do you have time for that? Because my daughter's dad had a lot of time for a lot of shady stuff. So um you're doing all these things, and so you got to figure out how to still have a somewhat of an interest in doing things that you love, and it's okay to do things that you love, even if it's like free at no charge, or sometimes communities have things like that. um the last one that I made a huge mistake on, um it was not using your kids as emotional support.
Ooh,
That
yeah.
one that one's hard. That one's hard because I think when you're a single mom, sometimes, especially like for myself right now, I don't have a partner. So you rely on a lot on your kids, through talking about your day, through, like, and if you really do get along with your kids because of this bond that you're building, especially if now they know what their dad is, there's a certain dynamic that now is more highlighted because now they know, and you kind of sort of bond over it. But at the same time, it's like they're still too young to be your friend. There's
Right, and there's that appropriate level of, like,
how
how
much do you
much
tell them?
emotional dumping
Yes.
can I do?
So get a therapist, ladies. The kids are not our therapist. Maybe, I love my son because he's like my biggest cheerleader. But at the same time, I need to make some friends that can cheerlead lead me too. I need woman friends. So there has to be a boundary set with how much we should share with our kids, even if they are emotionally intelligent, and how much of that you should be processing in therapy, and then how much of, just basically how to create a boundary that way they're not feeling like they're carrying the weight of like being your emotional support. It's too much on a kid. They're too young.
Right, and you don't want them to end up going to therapy because of all the emotional
Yeah.
trauma their mom put on
Right,
them.
exactly. And like I said, these tips, I literally created them because they're mistakes that I have made that I'm still sorting through.
Parenting in general, again, when you're in a traditional relationship, you're constantly reevaluating what you're doing and trying to be a better parent. So naturally, when you're now separate and in a high conflicts co-parenting relationship, there's a lot that you're going to look back on and say, "Oh, maybe I
Yeah.
shouldn't have done that."
Yeah. And it takes a special level of like humbleness too to be able to recognize that, because I don't think we as parents sometimes want to hear how we messed up. Like it's
Right.
very
Right.
uncomfortable to hear, and my kids got older and they're pretty vocal when I have messed up, and it makes me really uncomfortable, but it's also an opportunity to really reframe, or stop doing certain behaviors, or stop talking a certain way, or what, you know what I mean? Like it's a way to still help your child be seen, even if it's uncomfortable. That's literally how relationships grow.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, what happens when you have to communicate with the other parent? And how do you do that without getting yourself triggered to become an emotional wreck or
Right. Or send
um,
the landmines they send.
right, right. How do you not respond? Because sometimes they're doing it because they are baiting
They
you. They
are.
know
Mhm.
they know how to get under your skin. So how do you effectively communicate the needs of your child without getting sucked in to their bait?
So I think it just depends on the context of the email. If they're, or if they're sending it or if you're sending it, I highly recommend that if you are in a high conflict uh the dynamic, that whenever I listen to women who are in high conflict dynamics and they're still texting and calling and emailing directly, I cringe. Or like it makes me nervous, because you're opening yourself up to so much harassment. That's essentially what it is. Some of these people will harass you, and they'll harass you for stupid things too. So um in terms of the communication, if you're sending it out, it's just better to just stay matter of fact and not include anything that would, nothing inflammatory, like, for example, well, do you remember when you did this in 2000, like, 20, and well, let's not do that again, and we're going to do this instead. Like, you have to kind of like reword it so that it's not so accusatory, especially if you're dealing with a high conflict person. They tend to be pretty defensive. So you want to sound flat and unemotional. If you are on the receiving end of a email they're typically very long, from my understanding and from my own personal experience. If you are receiving an email where um they're just having at it and just bashing you to, another degree that is also triggering for you, because it can be very triggering. If you're just being bashed and you're looking at it and you extract to see if the email needs to be responded to, if there's anything on there that pertains to your child that maybe you need to address, if he's just rehashing stuff from whatever he thinks of you that you did while you were together, that does not require a response. If basically you have to be in the mental space to try to be in a mental space to respond to it. And if it doesn't meet like the criteria of it being responded to, I would not respond at all. Or you can just write the words duly noted. And
That's that's what I've heard friends
I used to
have
do that a
used.
lot, and eventually my daughter's dad ended up really hating it, to the point that he actually would tell our daughter how much he hated it, that he was sending these like lengthy emails of what a horrible mom I am, or what he thought, or whatever I did back in 2004, that now he's like somehow tying to current stuff. It was really annoying and draining. So there's a lot of circular thinking happening. So whenever I would get the emails, I started dissecting them to see if I really needed to respond to something that was court related, that my daughter needed, or yeah, that's pretty much it. Anything else that it revolved around bashing me, it usually got a duly noted or a noted.
Okay, yeah, and that makes sense because you're shutting it down.
Yeah.
There's how does somebody else respond to
So
that? You know?
right. And then the reason that I ended up starting to even do that, I forgot how I got that idea from. I ended up having to look more into how he was talking to me, because number one, the courts weren't helping. Even though we were on our family wizard was ordered for us because of the high conflict scenario, but it became another means for him to continue to verbally abuse me. I would submit those to the courts, and the courts didn't really view it as a concern, even though it was, slowly incrementally becoming more like, you know, really unnecessary, So I started looking into these emails, and I remember one time he emailed me and he was like on Family Wizard, and he flat out told me, I don't care um what kind of conversation we're having, communication we're having. I just want to make sure that we're still communicating. And when he said that, I was like, ew, like, this is so
Yeah.
toxic, and you still want to keep conversing? Like, this has like no value at all. And that's when I went looking for other methods of not engaging. And I went looking for gray rock. Have you heard of gray rock before?
I have, but do you mind just explaining that? Because it's a term that's familiar to some, but not everyone.
So my understanding, and I haven't used gray rock in a hot minute now, but my understanding is that gray rock is when you're in a difficult situation with someone who is toxic or difficult, because there's different levels of toxicity. Um, you basically don't sound as exciting as like having to engage in the conflict. Like if they're inviting you to the conflict, don't engage, or you're very short, you're very flat with your answers, and that's kind of how I understood it when I was using it. And eventually the emails did become less frequent, in terms of him engaging with me. But it wasn't just the emails. It was, I didn't just do that. I did other things too, to basically, I wouldn't say get rid of them, but just to stop that type of behavior coming my way, Um,
Mhm.
but it helped. It helped to constantly write duly noted. And to my knowledge, they did not like that. And I
Which is kind of a win in
Well, I
itself.
kind of just became very apparently they don't like boring people, like they don't like it when you don't engage. So I stopped
Mhm.
engaging. I always wanted to like defend myself and go tell him my truth and go, counter whatever he's saying about me. I stopped caring. I stopped caring about him thinking I'm a terrible mom. I stopped caring about him trying to, send me an email. Oh, if you don't do this, I'm taking you to court. Okay.
Right, and that's brilliant advice because these are individuals that you can't argue with. You can't
Yeah.
rationalize anything. You can't win. You're just going to keep going in a circle where they will continue to verbally abuse you or insult you or whatever, and you're going to constantly be left in this loop of trying to feel that you need to defend yourself. But yeah, if you just gray rock them and not engage, I think that's the best thing you can do because you're not going to change their mind or change their opinion about
Yeah,
you.
you're not. And the thing with too is that when you're in it and you start learning these things that we're talking about, don't think that number one, that the things are going to change immediately, because you've probably been at this for a while. Number two, don't be surprised if you actually do take the bait one day and you're like, oh shoot, I'm back in it. Because
Right.
it's more like a habit that you have to develop with time. You know what I mean? Like these strategies of, how not to engage, they're developed with time. Usually with high conflict, the conflict has been going on for such a long period of time that at some point it's you who has to change your behavior and how you engage in the conflict in order for there to be a change. So, and there was times where I did get baited even after I knew about gray rock and was in therapy and did all the anger management. I still was baited, and I still fell for it. And I was like, and I would have to reframe and check myself, and I'm like, oh shoot, I'm back in there with you again. you know
Well, and it's frustrating because you get out of these relationships and you think, okay, I'm out, I'm good. We'll co-parent. I know how I'm supposed to co-parent. They should do the same. And then you have this experience and it's frustrating because you have to change your
Yes.
reaction. So it's almost like, why do
Right.
I always have
Right.
to be the
Right.
person who makes the changes?
Well, to the most simplified answer for that is that when you do change that, it actually helps you with your kids, because once you start not putting so much focus and energy on the conflict with the father, or in this, we'll just say father, you will then be able to kind of train yourself to be okay to listen to things about him. I know that with my daughter, my mentality and how I eventually would end up not having that much of a reaction over the emails. Um, I focused more on developing a relationship with her, and then through my anger management classes that were free through the community that I lived in, I created a space for my daughter where she could talk about whatever she saw fit that I should know about, or whatever she felt comfortable sharing with me, whether it be even something nice about dad, he loves cooking, you know what I mean? Like that way I didn't feel this level of like internal hate, you know?
Right.
So my daughter got really comfortable just sharing little minuscule, details about them without me feeling so upset by hearing even the mention of their name, you know? So it in essence just helped me develop better, not just coping skills with those emails, but it also helped me have a different relationship with my kid, because now I mean whenever they're mentioned, I can definitely just you know listen to my kids experience, because they have an experience with their dad, right? So and the truth of the matter is that our kids are going to have characteristics of their other parent, you know so they're the other parent, so knowing that, as it's like it kind of went in a different direction because we're talking about emails, but it's all connected. It's all connected
Hmm.
because essentially it helped me develop a better relationship with my kid.
Well, and I think being able to emotionally step
Mhm.
back from a response, it helps you also when your kid comes
Yes,
home and says, Mom or dad said this
right.
about you. And instead of getting like
Yeah,
flipping out
that
in
was
front of
me
your
actually.
kid.
I actually hated Wednesdays because that's the day that we would switch over custody. I never knew what she was going to bring over. And I used to hate them because I didn't know what thing they were going to be, that had been discussed about me, how I was being bashed or what negative light I was being portrayed on, so I didn't like Wednesdays for a long time, but eventually it ended up changing. It changed, and a lot of it came from me looking up for resources, and also me going to therapy, and then implementing it. And a lot of it was actually trial and error. Like I was hoping this would work. Maybe it did. And I was constantly adjusting, like to see if things would improve. And a lot of the improve, I didn't even really look at I didn't even look at it to see if he was improving. That's not really my concern. I was trying to see how I can improve with my kid. That's what I was concerned with.
Because ultimately that's the important thing is how your children, what's the word? Evolve, I
Yes.
guess, through the relationship. So you have taken your experience and your background and you now offer coaching
Yes.
services for
Yes,
this,
I
right?
am now a high conflict co-parenting coach, and a lot of it stems from having two kids with two different dads. I managed at some point two child custody cases, two child support, and my longest custody battle was for my daughter. It stemmed for almost a decade.
So I know we're going to talk about some other like legal options and things, but since we're on that coaching topic, how if somebody wanted to get to you and ask you for some coaching services, how do they do
They
that?
could just find me at Marisol Vasquez official, and then I have a link tree on there, and they can do. I have a coaching. The coaching sessions can be booked through there, but then I also have some free services. I do have an online support group called Empowered Moms Circle, and it's just focused on high conflict co-parenting and just supporting moms through it. Just basically getting through it. It's not going to necessarily solve all the problems, but I developed it because I remember when I was in it, I felt so alone. I literally felt like I was the only one going through it. So that's how my support group started. And then the second portion is that my ebook is on there too, and it does help with co-parenting strategies in terms of helping the tips that I mentioned earlier. They're actually in the book, and then along with some journaling, just so that you can kind of start turning things in a different direction. That's not going to change your ex. Let me just be upfront. It's not about him or her.
Right.
It's more about how do you gain some peace through this chaos that can also safeguard your relationship with your kids.
And that's so important. And I'll include those links in the show
Thank you.
notes. So speaking of support, so what kind of support is there out there for individuals who are in this co-parenting dynamic?
I would say there's a lot of moms out, a lot of not only are moms now, like even like yourself, there's a lot of moms out there that are developing either podcasts or even Instagram accounts just talking about their experiences. So a lot of us are on there, you know, talking about how real this is because I think I don't think it gets enough publicity, I would say. You know what I mean? Like these are children that are being affected by an abuser. And then not only that, when we go to court, it doesn't really solve anything. It usually will make it worse. So not so that's when post separation abuse comes in, you know. So the problem didn't really get resolved. It just got extended to a different entity. So
Hmm.
I used to be really upset and never understood why there's not more like highlight on how many kids go to abuser houses on a daily basis and because they have gained custody even though there's harmful, you know, or questionable um parenting things that they're doing. For my case with my daughter's father, I was told that they didn't say shitty, but he just wasn't bad enough for her to be removed from him. He wasn't bad enough. And I'm just standing there like,
Oh,
what do you mean? Here's all my evidence.
right.
Here's all the family wizard stuff that he's been telling me. It wasn't enough. And it just wasn't enough, you know. And in terms of resources, I ended up looking for books. You know, now there's a lot more, like I said, there's a lot of more women speaking out on it. But therapy, I highly recommend therapy if you can get it. I used to get it from a local Jewish community center at that time, and they were giving it to me for free because of my income. And like I said, I also did the anger management classes, and even that was kind of weird because I'm like, I knew I had anger stuff going on. And I mean, don't get me wrong, you have every right to be mad. But when it comes to your child, you have to figure out how to like really navigate that because you have to create like a safe space for your kid. So even though on a Wednesday, my daughter would come and I would have a terrible reaction by getting mad, I had to change it. I had to change it because my kid needed a safer space and my anger wasn't allowing for that.
Right. And speaking of court, you did mention court. Are there certain documents or things that someone could bring with them that would help to support their case? I know there's a lot. That's a big uphill battle in itself. But was there anything that you found
You know,
helpful?
I what I had at that time, I actually created a log. I had logs. I had logs upon logs upon logs, you know. So that's all I can think about, you know. I did use a lot of the self-help center, a lot of it, you know, when I was in it. I used the family law facilitator's office at that time, a lot of the times as well, you know. But in terms of a form, I don't know if there's really a form, but I just remember having a log, you know, a log of whatever it is that was happening, details, you know, time, date, who did what, who said what, you know, things like that.
You also mentioned therapy for yourself, and therapy for the kids is
Mhm.
probably not a bad
Right.
idea. Are there other professionals or out there that uh, individuals can look for to help make a better environment for their kids?
Other professionals, I think other than a therapist, I can't really think of one. I mean, I would
Mhm.
probably throw myself in there and then think that maybe I can help that, you know, to basically for my coaching services, I only focus on what's happening in your home because you can't, as a mom, you can't control what's happening in their home. And that's actually a lot of what some of that high conflict stems from, you know, because you start thinking that maybe you can, you know, control that and you can't, you know. So
Mhm.
through my coaching services, I basically focus on what you can control within the four walls of your home.
Right. Which is, it's so
It is.
difficult too, because, in this relationship, all that control was taken away
Right.
from you.
Mhm.
And now you're just trying to, like, I don't want to be a victim
Right.
anymore. I want to be this survivor and navigate my life without having to,
Deal with it.
I get that. So, yeah, with your coaching services, do you do one on one or do you do group
For now, I
services?
only do one-on-one, but I also wanted to mention that one of the things too that I feel like really helped is that I come from a toxic family dynamic. I did not have good parents. So something that really helped me that kind of moved the needle with my children too is that I had to heal the unresolved childhood trauma that I carried so that I can become a better parent and evolve with my children. That's something that you can capitalize on. That's going to be hard, but that if you want to be strategic about it, because that's where my brain goes, how to strategize. A person that's toxic will never be able to do that.
Right. And I think for you, it's helpful to have an individual like yourself who's gone through it and's been through a childhood
Yes,
like this, because you have almost more of a compassion or more of a relatability to it, I suppose, as far as a coach. Like I would feel comfortable knowing that you truly
right?
understand from your point of view.
Right. Yeah, yeah. So a lot of it, my coaching services are all through me in my experience. And they do focus a little bit on like generational trauma, and also the high conflict co-parenting. And then I also do throw in there, I'm a big believer in natural healing modalities. So I do throw in there some if the person wants some suggestions on what can help you through the stress and anxiety of having to go through a high conflict co-parenting situation. And because a lot of us actually hide our mental health when we're going through it because it can be weaponized.
Of
Mhm.
course, anything about you
Anything,
can be
every
weaponized and they will find it.
yes, and I'm. It's interesting. I just brought it up because everything I'm still learning how to be in the aftermath of it, and how to be even in like being in these spaces, because so much of myself, of my being, things I love, things I disliked, were weaponized to in an attempt to remove my daughter from my home. Because he actually, once he got 50-50, he actually that he wasn't satisfied with that. He came at me hard for full custody. And that's when
Ooh,
he brought out the big guns, and he tried to use every aspect of my life that he thought he can capitalize on to gain full custody and to pinpoint me as a unfit mother. And that's when he used my toxic family dynamics from my past. um, and that's kind of the experience that I had. So it's incredibly traumatic because you're like trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. So now that I'm out of it, I feel like I'm still processing portions of it because so much of it was so like that's why I call them landmines, because like you they're like bombs. You're getting hit from everywhere, right? So um that's what I think makes me the most relatable, because I've actually been in it in so many aspects of it that honestly I would have rather wished that I would have never had this experience. And whenever I talk to some of the women that do reach out to me, I tell them that I am sorry that they had this experience, but I'm glad that they have found me, because I wouldn't
mhm.
wish this on anyone.
And when somebody does reach out to you, do you formulate sort of a plan or an outline or a guide of how you're going to go through the coaching
Yes,
process?
I actually have a form that they fill out prior to us meeting that I like to that I go through. That way I can strategize how I can help them best. And I do ask them what they've tried before. That way I'm not like just regurgitating the same thing, and they get the most value from talking to me.
Okay. So before I'm going to ask you to list all those things again, but is there anything else that you think that we need to talk about before we get into all of your links and everything again?
All I can think about that came up right now is take care of yourself. There's so many times that I was younger, so I went to court on an empty stomach with just coffee in my stomach. Take care of yourself,
Oh,
eat something if you're in it right now, eat something, get some water. It in court, there's no emotions, so it's really impersonal. I I checked my emotions at the car, and I purposely made sure that I never parked near him. So
oh, that's smart.
I used to sometimes watch and get there earlier I'm very observant, so I used to watch where he came from so that way I stay away from him.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's
So
definitely a good
whenever
point.
I hear people sitting next to each other, or you must at some point sit next to each other, but in terms of outside the court, I actually strived to not be near him, and I parked where he wouldn't park so that I can have my time and I can have my moment.
Yeah. To mentally prepare yourself to go
Yeah.
in.
Well, it's literally
Okay.
a battle.
It is. It is. I was just about to say into the battle, and it
Right.
is actually a
Mhm.
battle. Okay. So one more time, do you mind just saying how people can find you?
Yes, Marisol Vasquez official on Instagram. I'm also on LinkedIn. If you have a LinkedIn, you can also find me with the same wording, Marisol Vasquez official. I also have a Facebook if you want to follow that too, and same thing, Marisol Vasquez official.
Okay. And those links will be in the show notes. And Marisol, it was so
Thank
great to
you.
have you.
Thank you so
This
much.
is so informative. This may not be the last time you're on because I think I know a lot of people who are in these situations, and I'm sure there's going to be more questions that come up and room for further discussion
100%.
for all of this. So,
It's a lot.
yeah, it is. It's so much. It's so much. And, everybody hang in
Yeah.
there. You're going to get through it. It may seem like you're never going to get through it, but you will.
Yeah.
And especially when you have a good coach on your side.
One step at a time, one step at a time, one moment at a time. You know, yeah, it was a very difficult time of our lives.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Marisol for joining me today, and thank you for listening. Make sure to check out Marisol's 1 in 3 profile with links to her website, socials, ebook, and coaching services, all included in the show notes. I will be back next week with another episode for you. Until then, stay strong, and wherever you are in your journey, always remember you are not alone. Find more information, register as a guest, or leave a review by going to the website 1in3podcast.com. That's the number 1, the number 3, podcast.com. Follow 1 in 3 on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1 in 3 podcast. To help me out, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. 1 in 3 is a .5 Pinoy production. Music written and performed by Tim Crow.